Hello, everybody, and welcome to part two of the LeanTossup college football podcast. We are going to go through, this is part two, so we're going to do our Narduzzi and our un-Narduzzi awards for this week. And we're going to do the G5 focus because obviously they get a New York Six bowl bid. And then we're going to talk about all the different title games. We're going to kind of do mini deep dives into each title game as we go through. So we'll do that, of course. Before I introduce my co-host here, just a quick note here for all fans of the podcast. Starting this week, so obviously we have this podcast and we'll have another one for bowl season for the college football side. However, though, starting this week, we are recording with obviously CDL Metrics. We're going to be recording the Call of Duty podcast. Call of Duty is back this week. Um, Again, if you're unfamiliar with Call of Duty, it's an esport. Obviously, people are familiar with the franchise Call of Duty, the first-person shooter game. There's an esport associated with it too. You have franchise leagues, all kinds of ways to bet it. You can bet spreads, totals, all kinds of stuff. Lots of really fun stuff. Lots of new changes for this year. It's gonna be a really fun year. The different sports books have added a ton of new markets on it. You now have basically qualifier wins, so you get to basic like mini season wins. You get to figure out how many wins a team is going to have over the course of their next 5 games. You have now more props markets. Really fun stuff. I'm really excited for this year. If you like betting on college football, and again, college football is near its end. Obviously, the NFL season is also near its end. If you're looking for something in the off season, why not try Call of Duty with us? And if you're subscribed to this feed, obviously all those videos will be coming out on YouTube, and they'll also be in the same podcast feed as well. So if you're interested in that, stick around. We enjoy some Call of Duty with us. So, are you ready to give out our Narduzzi and un-Narduzzi awards, Buck?
I am. My Narduzzi is this guy just grabbed the award by the throat last Saturday. This was some real work all around. Dan Lanning, coach of Oregon. Oregon, I was just about to go out and walk the dogs because that game was out of hand. Oregon led by 21 with under 20 minutes left in the game. The opposing quarterback at that point was 6 of 13 for 60 yards and 2 touchdowns. And no, his name was not Jack Salopek from Western Michigan. This guy was having a very much a Western Michigan quality kind of game at quarterback. From that point on, Oregon State outscores Oregon 28-3, and Oregon State is not even trying to pass at this point. It's just all they can do is run. I don't know how they go on this scoring drive or this continuing amount of scoring. There were some Oregon mistakes along the way, but man, it really got away from them. And just as they were barely holding on to the lead, landing, and credit to him, he's done this all season. He goes for it in 4th and 1 on his own 29. And I'm all for doing what the numbers say to do, but at some point, you know, you and I will overrule our models from time to time, and that was a time to overrule the model and say, "Hey, I got to punt the ball here. I can't just give them the ball on the 29-yard line when they can't even throw a pass." Um, I saw some people on Twitter saying, "Hey, the defense stinks. Of course you have to go for it there." Well, guess what? Maybe you don't hire idiot Tosh Lapoy as your defensive coordinator. You're not stuck in that situation where you have, a very talented defense that can't stop a team that can't even pass the ball. And this brings me to I've been thinking about this basically since you went on your pilgrimage to the Yukon or wherever you went. Um, the Oregon narrative, there's no way I could have dreamt any of this up, and it still goes through the coaching changes. So I didn't see them doing this well. I think their staff is horrible. I was wrong about some of their staff. Um, Oregon's success, and this is just weird to say out loud, because Lanning is a defensive guy. Their success is all on offense. Their defense is basically average for all of FBS and below average for Power Five. Um, their offensive coordinator, who was horrible at Auburn and Florida State, and who immediately made Florida State better by leaving. We've seen Florida State; they have like a top 5 offense now on my my metrics. This guy turned around the career of Bo Nix, which You said before the season, you're saying, "Hey, Bo Nix had some good games," and I told you, "Hey, just stop." Just I did an intervention.
Don't do this.
Um, yeah, and now we're at the point where I'm wondering what Oregon even has because they stunk on the head coach's side of the ball, and they're losing their offensive coordinator to Arizona State. This is all just like I don't know how we got here. If you had told me before the season that's where we would wind up, I would say there's no way this is how this turned out. But it is where we are, and it's just what a capstone to a weird season where it just the worst coaching job of that Saturday was Dan Lanning just having that game, a rivalry game, slip through your hands that way. That's going to sting for a while. That
It
was just oof.
it's also funny because I said like first week of the season, I said like, oh man, this Oregon team, they're in really big trouble. Like I don't think they're going to be able to beat Oregon State, and then they actually had a really good season, and then also lost to Oregon State. So again, I mean, again that was kind of a knock. It's like, oh man, Oregon State's going to be horrible. Turned out Oregon State was like actually okay, but no, I mean. Again, this arc of the season has been absolutely insane. I think had you asked anybody, I think everybody would have thought that Miami won the coaching change to get Mario Cristobal in exchange for Dan Lanning. Well, not exactly one for one change, but you know what I mean. But no, I mean it's crazy how the season has gone, and we'll see them again in a bowl. They missed out, like again, losing to Oregon State cost them a shot at the conference championship game.
Yeah.
And if had that not happened, they'd be going to what is it, Vegas? Where are they
Las Vegas.
Are
Yep.
they in Vegas? Yeah. So like this will be an interesting team for next year. I think maybe give Dan Lanning some time to get a defense going. Again, like if he doesn't trust the defense, there's probably reasons why the defense has been bad all year. But remember, he was the defensive coordinator for Georgia, so there's probably a potential for him to be actually able to actually develop a defense at some point. So I think you give him some time next year. This team could do some damage. I'd be interested to see what this team can do next year. Um, but
I have no idea what to expect. I mean,
that's the thing, yeah.
the one thing Mario does is recruit. He left a good roster on both sides of the ball. So I don't know. I mean, what I know about Oregon, I mean, I thought their offense was destined to be horrible, and they were like a top offense in the entire country. They were
Mhm.
just dynamic,
Yeah,
except for the end of the Oregon State game somehow. I don't know how that happened. Well, Bo Nix was hurt, so we'll give them, some relief, but I don't know where they go from here. So I doubt you have a Narduzzi. You're too nice of a guy.
uh, I don't know. Can we give it to Brian Kelly in for at
Yeah, that's
LSU?
not bad. Yeah.
That's I guess the like how did that how like this team put up 20 points against UMass? How do you let them get 48 or was it 38? I can't remember.
38, yeah.
38. Not that big of a difference, honestly. Like how like this isn't you took down Bama. You took down Bama. How? Like I don't understand. Like what is it about Texas A&M? I don't understand how this team can be so like can this Jekyll and Hyde, right? This team can almost lose to UMass, lose to App State, and then beat LSU before they go to. Now I think part of it could potentially be this was a look ahead spot for LSU. They're like, oh my god, we're going to the SEC championship game. We weren't supposed to be doing that at all. And you look ahead to Georgia, which is one of the reasons why we're gonna talk about LSU and maybe look at them this week. But like I think maybe this was a look ahead spot. Maybe they're like, oh my god, we're gonna start focusing on Georgia, focus on Georgia. That's the only thing I can think of. Outside of that, I don't I this that loss is really inexcusable. Outside of like, okay, we gotta get ready for Georgia. Like, did they just completely ignore LSU? Like, did they completely ignore Texas A&M? I don't know.
How about this for an alternate theory? What you say is plausible. How about I've said for a long time Brian Kelly knows how to win football games. How about Brian Kelly is thinking about how do I win this conference title at someday? He says, you know what? I don't really have anything. I'm not going to make the football playoff. Maybe he thinks two losses is just going to keep him out of getting a playoff invite. Maybe he says, if I just kind of just throw this one, it keeps Jimbo in College Station for like 3 years, and it keeps whatever offensive they problems have longer, and it just it takes one obstacle out of the way.
That's fair. I mean,
And Jimbo recruits all this talent, so he's keeping away from people that could actually beat me with the talent.
because if you beat Jimbo, he's gone. Right? Like if Texas A&M loses that game, he's fired, right?
Yeah, it's too expensive. I just say that I'm almost certain that if he beats Jimbo, there are less changes there are more changes demanded. I think that Jimbo's going to have a lot more say over what really happens with the offense now, as he got to do his great victory lap after that game,
Yeah.
rather than actually ceding control of the offense.
That's fair. That this might be like the most consequential meaningless win ever. So,
Yeah, yeah. Okay, my unnardoozy. This is obviously not for Saturday, but this is a lifetime achievement unnardoozy. David Shaw, I've been saying for a couple weeks, and hardly the only one to say it, that they needed to make a change. He retired, resigned, whatever you want to say. I just want to just recognize he's Stanford's all-time best coach, all-time winningest coach. 3 Rose Bowl trips, won 2 of them. This is crazy. I was looking this up. Do you know that only Michigan, Ohio State, and Stanford or USC have more Rose Bowl appearances than Stanford?
wow.
Yeah, you could win a bar bet on that. Tied with Washington. 4 top 10 finishes, which is ridiculous for Stanford. And of the last 4 seasons, 3 sucked. What really got overlooked was that crazy 2020 season where they finished with a winning record, even though they couldn't even practice in their own county. They're practicing in Santa Cruz County. They're practicing literally like at a high school outside of, nearby University of Washington. That was a really overlooked good coaching job here. I think David Shaw is appreciated. For a while, I've been thinking if I had a kid and if I had a kid that could play football, where would I want him to go? The answer isn't Stanford. The answer was absolutely Stanford under David Shaw. So, by all accounts, good guy, good coach. Ran its course. I wish him well. He's probably got a boatload of money from Stanford, and good for him.
Mm. Yeah, I mean, Stanford has done a lot. They've had randomly good seasons, but I think it is time for a coaching change, I guess. And yeah, I mean, he's done he's done a lot for the program, and yeah, he it's time. Maybe it's time for some to move on. I think, but yeah, like they've had Stanford's had some incredible seasons under David Shaw, and I think it's a changing of the guard there at Stanford for sure. And
Yeah.
we'll see what Stanford is able to do in the future if they're able to like are they going to try to go back to more running game? Like they've randomly recruited well. Like Tanner McKee was randomly getting NFL buzz. Obviously Davis Mills is an NFL quarterback. Andrew Luck a couple of years ago drafted the NFL. So they've produced some talent. So this is far from a talentless team that he's coached. So
Yeah.
yeah.
All right, real quick, G5 focus. Just want to make a little plug here that it seems that whoever wins the American Championship game is going to get the G5 New Year's Six or Cotton Bowl bid. I just want to really quickly point out that I think Troy at 10-2, if they beat Coastal, which they should, we'll get to that in a minute. I have them rated as a team higher than anybody in the American. I have the Sun Belt ranked slightly higher than the American overall as a conference. If Tulane beats UCF in the American, great. They deserve the Cotton Bowl bid. But if Crazy Psycho UCF pulls off the upset, if you compare their resumes, Troy's is better. They have, they both lost to a Power Five team. If I look at the G5 losses, I can accept Troy losing to App State. I don't know if you remember, that was when game day was App State, before we realized App State was kind of a whatever team.
Yeah.
App State wins on a last second play. UCF loses to Navy. Um, Troy just deserves it if they get 11 wins. And that's end of sermon. Everybody go out the back of the church now.
Yeah.
Okay, so as you mentioned, conference title games. Just want to go over these in order of how they're being played. The Pac-12 game we talked about in part one. I like USC. I think you were able to be convinced by my case there. So Conference USA, North Texas is at UTSA, who's given 7.5. Two very good offenses as far as the G5 is concerned. North Texas is an average defense in Conference USA. UTSA is above average. Um, UTSA was undefeated in conference, but they should have had one or two losses. When they actually met up in the regular season, North Texas outplayed them. UTSA, like I said, even though they've got good defensive metrics, they're goosed a little bit by just dominating really bad offenses in Louisiana Tech and Rice. Um, my model has this UTSA by 33-28. I think my model is a little fooled by UTSA running it up on crappy teams, and North Texas is not a crappy team. I'm not gonna make this a pick or anything, but I would give some thought to North Texas on the money line here.
Yeah, I actually looking at this now, I actually have so I'm seeing 8.5 on my books. And I have this as UTSA minus 4.6, minus 5.
Mm-hmm.
So I actually do agree. I think UTSA is a little bit overrated, and I think I'll take North Texas. Definitely take them plus 8.5, and maybe even put some money line on that too. I don't hate that at all.
Okay. The MAC, I kind of vented my spleen about one of these teams in part one. Toledo is playing Ohio at a neutral spot. Ohio's getting 2.5. These teams did not face each other in the regular season. Interesting matchup in that Ohio has by far the best offense in the MAC. Toledo has the best defense in the MAC. Ohio's defense is a problem, though. I have them ranked 10th in the MAC. I mentioned a couple weeks ago, I think it was last week when I gave their coach an Narduzzi. They've had three losses on the season, and two of them I would say are extremely forgivable at Iowa State and at Penn State. Aside from those two losses, the passing game has been awesome all season. I can definitely forgive. Those are two really good defenses. You know, poor performances in that spot. Their passing game has really been kind of unstoppable. Their quarterback, I forget if it's Nathan or Curtis Rourke. I have him eighth in the whole nation in QB plus. I have him almost 2 yards per attempt better than the second best passing game in the entire conference. So if I'm kind of going with who's got the best squad in this game, it's definitely Ohio's offense. Toledo quarterback DeQuan Finn is uncertain for this game. He's obviously very important to them. He's a good quarterback, not quite the level of Ohio's, but he's good. Toledo's defense has been very consistent in MAC play, except they had that really inexplicable Bowling Green meltdown 2 weeks ago. You couple that with losing to Western Michigan. I'm just kind of wondering what on earth do we have this team that's come into this conference game. I can't just help but wonder, can Jason Candle really win a title game against a team that actually has some talent here? My model has this Toledo 28-27, but I'm leaning towards the best player, the best squad, which is Ohio's quarterback and Ohio's offense. So don't know if I'm going to play this one, but if I would, I definitely would take Ohio money line.
Yeah, I actually do have. I have Toledo as a bigger favorite, but at the same time, I remember last year I had Kent State over Northern Illinois, and that ended horribly for me. So I don't necessarily trust my model in MAC championship game, conference championship games. So I'm kind of inclined to go Ohio there. I'm not. I'm not gonna lie. I might not hate a play on Ohio there. So
I was with you last year too. I mean, Northern Illinois just crushed my model last year. They had just insane luck, and that was just kind of just the capper.
yeah, that was rough. Like I'm like, how is this? Like just Northern Illinois was just crushed. How is this happening? It just made no sense.
Yeah. All right, Big 12. Kansas State is versus TCU. I think the latest I've seen is 2.5. Does that sound right? TCU
Yep, it's two
favorite,
and a half.
neutral site. They faced each other in the regular season. TCU won by 10. I think Kansas State actually took the lead early in that game. This is one of those kind of what became now prototypical TCU screw around and then win at the end thing. Um, Post game win expectancy. This is kind of a coin flip between the two teams when they met already. Um, in that game, Kansas State's defense was okay. It wasn't awesome. Kansas State's by far their three worst defensive efforts were against Texas, Oklahoma, and TCU. Otherwise, they were very tough. Um, of all the defenses that TCU played, only Texas gave them any kind of problems. Texas, this kind of gets lost because Sark just has this great ability to mask the ultimate talent of his teams. Texas I actually had as the best defense in the Big 12, even better than Iowa State. Kansas State is not as good as Texas. So I'm kind of wondering if Kansas State is going to be able to pose a threat to TCU in terms of slowing down TCU. The TCU defense is kind of all over the place. They were really good against Texas, terrible against Kansas, which I can understand, and Baylor, which is a little puzzling. We all have one bad game, but that's just a really weird team to have a clunker on defense. Baylor's offense has been kind of whatever this season. I don't know if TCU is a bad matchup or if that was just for Kansas State or Kansas State just had an off day. My model actually has this 33-33. I'm not going to bet this one because, as I mentioned in part one, I've got that preseason ticket on Kansas State to win the Big 12. I'll just ride that out. But if I didn't have that, I definitely wouldn't play this. This is just kind of mixed signals to figure out what's going on here.
Yeah, this is the thing for me. I've got weirdly, I have TCU 33, Kansas State 22. So I have basically a repeat of the regular season, kind of, which is weird. My model has had huge problems with TCU. Randomly overestimate them sometimes, and then underestimate them on other games. But like, it's really struggled with this TCU team. I think they've been kind of inconsistent in some parts. I I have that juicy Kansas State to win the Big 12 ticket. So at this point, I feel compelled to at least try to balance that out with some TCU money. But looking at this though, like there's so many ways to play this. Like there's so many things that feed into this game, right? Like there's also the fact of if you're looking at this, um, like basically, do you have like the issue here is in terms of this game, right? Like, okay, there's other markets you could play, right? Like Ohio State to make the playoff, right? Minus 110, roughly in around maybe even or so. I want to play that, but at the same time, is that not also just a bet for Kansas State to win the Big 12? Right? Because like it's either Kansas State to win the Big 12 or Utah to beat USC, right? Either of those has to happen. But at that point, if it's gonna be Kansas State winning, well then I already have the massive Kansas State winning ticket. So then why am I gonna bet Ohio State to make the playoff, right? Because then it's just basically like, okay, Kansas State wins and then also that wins, right? I should be trying to get other balance things out. Like, so it's really weird. I don't know the best way to play this. I think I would favor TCU, but I think you just have to kind of bet TCU here. Maybe you put something on TCU and then hope that maybe Kansas State gets ahead early, and then you just unload on TCU. That's that's not a bad idea. But I also
kind
still
of kind of what happened last time, right?
that is
Kansas
kind of
State
what
went into
happened
that early
last time.
lead.
They did. Like if I might put something on TCU, and then if Kansas State gets to an early lead, just unload on TCU at like plus 120. Be like, cool, here we go. Um, but no, I don't know the best way to play this. I'm really kind of stumped by how the best way to target and bet this game. I'm gonna have to put something on TCU to basically cover that futures ticket. But outside of that, I think TCU's a better team, but I could definitely see us like back of my mind. I just like this TCU team has avoided a lot of sticky situations, and they've
Yeah.
been really lucky in a lot of those games. And I gotta think at some point that luck is gonna run out, and I gotta think that the second that luck runs out, the committee's gonna be like, we were right the whole time. We knew they weren't that good. We never wanted to put them there, but everybody else around them fell apart. So now we're going to put Ohio State in. That's what I think is going to happen. If they,
Very, very possible, yeah.
it's like they've not wanted to rank TCU very highly at all, and for decent reason. Like I think I always wanted TCU to be higher because I always thought that the other teams around TCU sucked, and I was right about the other team sucking, but I was never really like I never thought TCU was like that good, but I thought they were just better than the teams around them. But now there's no one around them. Now they're
Yeah.
third, right?
Yep.
It's very thin air up there, right? So I think there's a regression coming for TCU, and maybe it could start on Saturday at noon.
Yeah. Before we move on, I just don't want to miss the opportunity to slam my friends at DraftKings, who opened up Kansas State at 50-1 to win the Big 12 because they don't know what they're doing. And so maybe their CEO, instead of worrying about short sellers, maybe he should worry about who on earth put Kansas State at 50-1 to Big the 12 before the season started.
Yeah.
Hire people that understand the business, you genius. So, okay, moving on. Speaking of genius, the Sun Belt. Coastal Carolina is at Troy. This is on campus game. Troy, last I saw, is giving 9.5. That line's bounced around. These teams did not face each other in the regular season. Grayson McCall, the Coastal quarterback, I have him first in all of FBS and quarterback plus. Um, since he's been out, their overall performance has dropped. Performance margin, so that's offense and defense, has dropped 19 points per game since he's been out. Um, yeah, that's significant. Um, if you look at the Sun Belt, there are three elite defenses by far: Troy, James Madison, and Marshall. Coastal was very bad versus Marshall, and that was with McCall. And they were obviously last week a lot worse versus James Madison, and that was without him. So even if he returns, I'm a little skeptical that he'd be 100%. I don't think that he's going to be 100% or that much of a factor, considering how he did against Marshall. Um, my model has this Troy 37-24, and that's with Grayson McCall in most of my baseline Coastal actuals. So I think this is even more of a blowout that's implied. I'm not saying we might. I expect to see Coastal struggle to score at all. So I like Troy giving the points here.
Yeah, I've got Troy minus 11. That's without Grayson McCall. I think, and for some reason this line has fallen. This is now Troy minus 8.5.
It's kind of bounced around.
Yeah, like is it just people think that McCall's gonna play? I don't think he will.
Yeah, I mean, if you look up, it seems uncertain. You know, uh, I just kind of wonder what he's going to be if he's back at in such, because he's not a drop back guy. He poses problems because he can really run too. Um, I'll put it this way: if Caleb Williams was out 2 weeks and he returned to play Utah, um, I wouldn't just say, "Hey, it's Caleb Williams and he's going to be just amazing." I'd say I really need to see exactly what he is, but I'd be super super skeptical.
Yeah, McCall has gotten some NFL draft buzz a little bit at least too, right? So I think if you're in that situation and you're sitting there and you're getting some NFL buzz, are you really gonna rush in to get into the Sun Belt championship game and whatever bowl Coastal Carolina gets to? Like, are you really fighting to get into that to get to play in that game? I don't think so. So yeah, I think we're gonna take Troy. We're gonna take the point. We're gonna lay the points with Troy. I think
Yeah. All right. Same region of the country, the SEC championship game, Georgia. This line keeps on moving around. What is it now? Are they giving like 16.5, I think?
17.5. I've seen 18 and a
Yeah.
half in some
Okay.
books.
Against LSU, they, as we probably know, didn't face each other in the regular season. What's really interesting about Georgia, when I'm looking into them a little more closely, their defense isn't as good as last season's. They're 10th in FBS. I had them second last season to Wisconsin. But man, they are amazingly consistent. They haven't had a bad game on defense all season. It's really almost kind of unbelievable. Every team has a bad whatever, but they didn't have any bad games. Um, the LSU offense, I have it as 32nd in FBS. I don't think they're just going to score much in this game. If I look a little more closely at the LSU offense, if I kind of segment their season into two parts, they're not sequential parts, but if I just kind of put them into pile A and pile B, if I take the games against New Mexico, UAB, Ole Miss, and Florida, and that's pile A, um, and then I put the rest in pile B. Um, Pile A is not from an actual scoring, but from an expected scoring, 14 points a game better than Pile B. And Pile B, their offense ranks 85th in FBS. So considering their opponents in Pile B probably don't have defenses as good as Georgia's and definitely not as consistent, you know, I think it's going to be really, really tough for them to score. Um, I think that eventually their defense, which is good, is going to crack from being on the field so much and just Georgia just doing Georgia things, kind of like what Michigan did to Ohio State. My model has this Georgia 38 to 24, 35 to 24. You know, I'm not going to bet this one, but if you were going to make me make a play, I'd probably go to Georgia. Just yeah, that's a lot of points. I don't know. I definitely can't bet LSU in this spot though.
I did actually bet LSU already. I think at 15. We'll see how the rest of the slate goes. I could be potentially. I don't think I want to bet it again. I do have something on. Like I'm not seeing a. Like I don't think it's going to be LSU's going to cover the 17 and a half, but not the 15 and a half. Like I think it's going to either be closer or not. I think that's
Yeah.
probably okay. I have this. I still have this as even. I don't know why I have it. I actually had LSU favored before. I have this slightly even. Maybe the model thinks this is a bad matchup for Georgia. I don't know. Um, but I'm just still unimpressed with this Georgia team. I mean, they were tied with Georgia Tech for most of that game. Now Georgia Tech obviously put it away at the end. Or sorry, they put Georgia Tech away at the end. But like for a bit there, that was a little scary for Georgia. Now that they eventually put on the jet engine there and covered the spread. Let me just look back at that game because it was. I remember watching the game. I'm like, what's happening here? Um, yeah, it was 7 to. It was Georgia Tech scored. It was 7-3 into the second quarter. Into the second quarter, and then midway through the second quarter, Georgia got a touchdown. It was 10-3 at the half. Then Georgia got a field goal, a touchdown, a field goal, a touchdown to lead 37-7. And then Georgia Tech got a touchdown to get it closer, but again, the spread was 37, 36 and a half. So it didn't matter. But like again, like it took an entire half of their offense to actually start doing things. That's concerning. That's not great. And I'm a little concerned about that if we're sitting here like Stetson Bennett was only 10 for 18, 140 yards against Georgia Tech, right? Like what are we sitting at here if it's Jalen Daniels, and again this is why we're talking about Michigan. Like I think there's value on not Georgia, and like if LSU were to win this game, what happens? Like they can't put an SEC champion in with 3 losses, can they?
Yeah, three losses is a bit much.
So then what do
Um,
they just put Georgia in regardless?
yeah, I think Georgia just gets the achievement for the whole season.
Well, that's dumb then.
Well,
I mean, and here's
nobody's
the thing:
accused college football of being overly smart.
like if we say okay, Clemson got eliminated because they lost to Notre Dame, then like how can we say yeah they got eliminated for that, but then Georgia doesn't get eliminated for losing to LSU, right? Like I know what you're saying, and like
Don't make me defend stupid things about college football, please.
I know it's so insane. Like this is why we need the 12 team playoff model, and if the Rose Bowl, what supposed to be the most the biggest thing in college football, if that's what keeps us from this 12 team model to fix this insanity, I'm going to be so mad if we have to deal with this for another 2 years because some people in the Rose Bowl decided that they settled that they weren't going to make less money, that they exclusively wanted to make more money. Like it's going to be I'm going to be really mad if that happens. So,
Uh, I just think that there might be some guys from FIFA with like suitcases full of cash that kind of makes something happen with the Rose Bowl. I don't know. Just there's got to be some kind of tie between those two corrupt organizations. I'll just keep it at that.
I mean, Qatar got the World
Yep.
Cup, so it's
Yep.
like you almost like they've got to be bribed. Like someone's got to get a bribe to make this work. I suspect probably someone at the Rose Bowl. Like it's insane. But like if the Rose Bowl is the thing that stops this insanity from ending, because this is the insanity, right? We actually have no idea who the other two teams are going to be. We just assume Georgia and Michigan are in no matter what happens. Which, to be fair, that is kind of fair. But Georgia could lose. If Georgia loses, I think that like if you look at the 538 playoff predictor, because they built one, which is it's cool, I guess. But like, if Georgia happens, nothing changes. If Georgia loses, nothing changes, which is really weird to me because I would have expected something to change. But I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah.
Weird to me. We'll see if everything else goes well. I could maybe be tempted into betting LSU. Like if Kansas State wins the Big 12, if USC wins, I could make and if basically if I have a ticket on Ohio State to make the playoff and like Kansas State eliminates TCU, then I could definitely be convinced to jump in on there on LSU. But we'll see.
Yep. Okay. All right, Mountain West. Fresno State versus Boise. I've got this as a at a neutral site, but I don't remember where. Kind of thought that maybe this might be. No, I checked that. I don't know. Kind of curious where that game is. I'll figure that out.
I'll check.
Um,
I'll check.
I've called this the unreliable actuals bowl because you've had like kind of just huge splits in the season for each team. Boise, as we recalled to much delight on this podcast, fired their offensive coordinator after that horrible disaster at UTEP where they got embarrassed. They bring in former head coach and former NFL coach Dirk Cutter, and he's completely turned the offense around. I had to pass on a lot of underplays that my model was suggesting because they had just so completely turned around their offense, and the model was a little slow to catch up to that. So we've got a decent amount of garbage in the Boise State actuals just on the offensive side. Fresno State lost Jake Hayner, their quarterback, against USC, and was out for 4 games after that, and the offense struggled without him. So you've got a third of the actuals that are for Fresno with, bad offense. That's not comparable to what we have now. So my model has thrown all this nonsense together and has Boise by 11. I just see this as too many disparate data points to try to figure out, a narrative that makes sense. So I'm not betting this one at all.
I have Boise State by a lot actually. So I'll think about it. I do kind of agree that this is a weird game and anything could happen, but I kind of do like Boise State in this slot. It's weird. I think Fresno State has been okay. Like weirdly enough, Fresno State's gone on a run after losing their quarterback. But like, actually, I'm just looking at their last 5 here on ESPN. So they beat San Diego State 32-28. They beat Hawaii 55-13. They beat UNLV 37-30. They beat Nevada 41-14, and then they beat Wyoming 30-0. I didn't like who let them schedule the worst 5 teams in the Mountain West in 5 straight weeks.
Well, not that they let him. The office did that for him. The conference office.
I mean, they knew like 3 of them were. Like, I mean, like, okay, fine. Maybe you didn't know Nevada was, but you should have known Nevada was. And then, like, Wyoming, like, UNL, like, and then again, it's like they beat New Mexico, they beat San Jose, but they lost by 20 to Boise before. They lost to UConn. Like, yeah, give me Boise here. I don't trust this. Like, how fraudulent of a run that is when you go from New Mexico 41-9, San Diego, you beat San Diego State by 4, you destroy Hawaii. Jake Hayner is back actually.
Yeah, he came back. He was out for 4 games, so that's with him back.
So he has been back. He
But
hasn't been as good though. He's been hurt a little bit, but
yeah,
yeah, give me Boise. I like this Boise team has been really fun since since the incident. But basically, yeah,
the incident. That's what we're calling it.
the loss to New Mexico State is the incident from now on. But no, I mean, this is I do like this team. It's a very good like I like this Boise State team, so I'm going with them.
Yeah, last thought on Boise too. I'm going to be really interested to see. I don't think Cutter stays around as offensive coordinator. I think he just did the school a solid. And
Hmm.
seeing what a horrible hire that Avalos made the first time around, I don't know. I'll see if how much, I guess, discretion, not that I can tell, but how much discretion he has in the next OC, or if they just ask Cutter to hire the next OC, since he's got a better record at Boise.
Hmm.
All right, in the American, UCF is at Tulane, so this is on campus, and Tulane is a 3-point favorite. UCF won by a touchdown a few weeks ago. UCF, as we've mentioned for a few weeks now, is all over the place, especially on offense. Their defense is just mediocre. One game that stood out to me, and this is when Jeff Collins was still coaching Georgia Tech. UCF beat Georgia Tech 28-10. If I do a post game expected score, I actually have that Georgia Tech, and this is Jeff Collins Georgia Tech, actually should have won that game 36-20. Um, just a sneaky, horrible effort. And we're talking about how psychotic they are. Even in their wins, they're just, you never know what you're going to get. I think that UCF, I think I kind of liken them to the guy that you don't think can fight, but they're just so crazy you don't want to mess with him. If that makes sense, just because you don't know what can come out of from nowhere. So you know, blank slate, question mark, wild card, whatever you want to say, as far as UCF goes, you know, comes with their territory. So Tulane had a big win at Kansas State, which ages better and better as the season has gone along. They had a bad loss against Southern Missouri, or Southern Mississippi, pardon me. Their offense is good, not great. Their defense is very good, second in the American. Their defense had two games that generally stick out as aberrationally bad. One of those was against UCF. You throw all this unknown stuff together. My model has Tulane by 33-25. Um, UCF's unpredictable nature and their good performance against Tulane last time makes this game just unbettable for me.
Yeah, I actually have a similar score for this game. I have Tulane 34, UCF 25. So
Wow.
we're both very similar in our model projections for that game. Um, I I think the play is Tulane, but the thing is, it's scary, right? Because UCF did beat Tulane a couple weeks ago, and I think I expected Tulane to win that game too, and sure enough, they lost it. So it's a bit scary, but I think um, maybe they can pull this out. I mean, I think you trust in the process, and you say this Tulane team is just better. They should be able to win. I think, but I don't know. I'm a little scared about that though. I think is more than fair to say.
Yeah, usually when I see games that are like, we both have about a 5 point differential here. Um, that's not enough of a difference for me to bet against the spread. But that's where I maybe take a look at the money line and say, okay, well maybe this is just a more sure straight up bet than the market's implying. But just again with who knows, what do you call it, the UCF du jour? Just we know what you're going to get of the day.
Hmm.
Who knows? Just I can't even make a money line play here. And then Tulane by 3 doesn't really make a money line play on UCF all that enticing, considering you're just kind of rubbing the juju beans together and praying to the sky and saying, okay, maybe good UCF shows up.
Hmm.
Maybe their quarterback can't throw, but we get past that. I don't know. There's so many angles that say just stay away on this one. So,
Yeah.
all right. Oh man, yeah. This next one's gonna have a lot of venting here. This is therapeutic for me, or cathartic, whatever you want to say. North Carolina versus Clemson, who's giving 7.5. These teams did not play in the regular season. Deep breath here. Clemson was the third best team in their own crummy division, behind Florida State and Louisville. I have them as the fourth best team in the ACC because I also have them behind Pitt. And yet here they are in the top 10. And why is that? Because they are ridiculously, stupidly, insanely lucky. They should be 7-5 or 8-4. Post game win expectancy 49% versus Wake Forest, 44% versus Florida State, 48% versus Syracuse. Those are all wins. They also had one that was barely over 50%, and I didn't even write it down because I'm just too frustrated by this idiot team and how lucky they are and their horrible quarterback. So their defense is not at the previous season's level. Usually they're about a top 5 or 10 defense. I have them 17th in FBS, good, but not the lights out version that we're used to seeing. Um, what's interesting is their two worst games on defense by far just stick out as aberrationally bad were against Florida State and Wake Forest. I have University of North Carolina basically, as good or better than both those offenses. So I'm thinking North Carolina, as my dogs go crazy in the background, will be able to score points. This is assuming that the North Carolina State game, for lack of a better term, was a one-off and just will not be repeated. The Clemson offense I have is 58th in all of FBS, and I have them behind teams such as Pittsburgh, Auburn, whose quarterback cannot throw the ball, and Michigan State, whose quarterback probably shouldn't throw the ball. If we take away the Louisiana Tech game, which really gooses up their numbers, I have their offense as the 73rd best in FBS. I'm really making a great indictment here about why you shouldn't play Clemson. And then we get to North Carolina, and their defense is just absolutely horrible. Now, I don't know if you remember I mentioned this maybe like late October or so. They were actually giving up only 21 points a game in ACC play for a while there. So if you kind of segment their season into two parts, the first 7 FBS games that they played, 5 of them were just objectively bad by my measures. The last 4, they only had one bad one, and that was against Wake Forest, who was a good offense. The other teams they played, Virginia, Georgia Tech, NC State, have NC State without Leary, not great offenses, but guess what? Clemson is not a great offense too. Um, I'm thinking this might come down to North Carolina defensive coordinator Gene Chizik versus DJU. I would probably go with Chizik in that case. Reminder: I've got the big ticket on Carolina to win the ACC. I think at 18-1. So I'm not going to play this. My model actually has Clemson by 2 here, but if I fill in a lot of the blanks along the way, I would probably play North Carolina.
Yeah, I don't have that. I don't have the North Carolina ticket, so I'm unabashedly playing North Carolina here. North Carolina again randomly losing to NC State, but again potential look ahead spot to this championship game. Clemson also inexplicably losing to not
South
South
Carolina.
Carolina, not Southern Carolina, no, South Carolina. No, that was again unexpected. Um, my model had that 7. I did play it, got very lucky there, but yeah, it was such a weird game. Again, it's possible that this Clemson team is kind of reverting, and now that this team isn't playing for a chance at the playoff, even a remote outer chance at a playoff, I don't hate. I think this team could kind of fold here, maybe UNC. But that being said, though, UNC has a habit of ripping my heart out, especially last year. So don't hurt me again, guys. Don't do this again. I remember excruciating North Carolina plus 6.5 against a Pitt team last season. Horrible flashbacks to that. Oh God. I mean, to be fair, this is 7.5, so it's probably fingers crossed okay. But yeah, it should be an exciting game. This is going to be 8 o'clock on Saturday night,
Yeah.
so could be a pretty fun time. We could be this game be the same time as the Big Ten championship game, which is going to be horrible.
Yeah, I was
So,
going to say this is very watchable, and its counterpart, the counter programming, is not as watchable
well,
for
this is
sure.
good because last year we had that the only late game was the Big Ten championship game between Michigan and Iowa, where they just straight up slaughtered Iowa. That was what was it, 40-7, or it was some insane number,
Yeah.
and like that game was unwatched. Like I watched that game with just horrid fixation because I remember I was like, no,
Horrid fixation.
well,
That's
because it was.
that's got to be like the season motto for some Iowa squad, right?
I
Horrid
mean,
fixation.
cause the thing was, I was like, okay, cause I didn't believe so much in Michigan last year. The model was still working on the college model. It was still in its infancy, and I was like, there's no way Michigan's going to win this game because like they finally like they're like the dog that caught the car, right? They finally beat Ohio State for like the first time in decades. I'm like, this screams letdown, and then sure enough they just obliterate this Iowa team. And like now this Michigan team's actually for real and like legit, and like this Purdue team, although they won the Big Ten West, they are not for real. Well, we'll talk about them in a second, but like, yeah, no, this game is the watchable night game, I think.
Yeah.
So
No, I agree. And let's do that. So, I think you were going kind of where I'm heading with this. I have Michigan in my rankings number one in entire FBS. I have them third on offense and third on defense, which is kind of unusual to be so high on both sides of the ball. You're talking about teams like 2019 Ohio State, your kind of peak Nick Saban teams that do this. Um, their defense has had no bad games, just like Georgia, but they've had 7 dominant games where so there have been like more of a dominant tone than I think we've seen in the Georgia defense this year. So you're talking about an absolute, I have them number one overall, even if you don't believe number one, they're absolutely nationally elite without any question. The respected question mark opponent, Purdue, is I have them as the 5th best team in the West, which I love the Big Ten West, but it's hardly a dominant division. I have them nationally 46th in offense and 95th on defense. There's just not a lot to look into here. My model has this 43-21. Um, I think I'm probably, if I was, I don't know, let's just see if I'm just looking for action. I definitely play Michigan, this 16 and a half. I don't know if it's gone up there since.
it's 16.5. Yeah.
Yeah, this seems like at least a 3 touchdown game to me. Now, Purdue has in their DNA the occasional just jump up and grab you, like when they beat Ohio State by like 30 or whatever that one crazy game was. They seem to have the capability to do that every once in a while, but I think it was last week I pointed out that Aiden O'Connell's really had a crappy year. He's actually in bum list territory, so I don't see bum list QB really being the guy capable of doing the. Some podcast calls it the snake in the toilet, where it just comes out of nowhere and and bites you in your vulnerable spot.
Yeah. I've got Michigan 46 to Purdue 17.
Yeah,
Like a 30-point spread. Yeah, if you're playing anything, you're playing Michigan. Um, we could potentially be looking at yeah, like it's gonna be an interesting game for some of the for like this team. You could maybe be looking at like some player props potentially. Like if Blake Corum is out, then look to McCarthy to be throwing it again. I think that Purdue defense is gonna more than likely give up those passes. So maybe McCarthy over 1.5, 2.5, depending what that line is set at. Yeah, I don't see how like the Big Ten West is just so bad. It is one of the worst divisions in college football right now. I really don't see how this team is able to really stop them. I think that there's a reason why Ohio State Michigan was the conference championship game basically.
yeah, um, yeah. I'm not going to call it bad. I'll just say it has a lot of character, a unique characteristics in the Big Ten West.
Yes.
All right. Podcast plays. You know what? I'm just going to make Michigan my first one here, given 16 and a half. Reminder, we're now 45 and 40 for this season, so a little bit above break even. So my first one is Michigan, given the points against Purdue.
Okay, I'll lock up. Um. Okay, give me Boise State. Boise State -3. Yeah, Boise State -3. Give me Boise State -3.
I made a strong case for this one. I'm going to easily take Troy, given the 9.5 to mortally wounded Coastal Carolina.
All right, give me North Carolina +7.5.
Wow. Just taking a note here. I made a case in part one about this, about my models just missing a lot of the as I called it, the roster oil that Utah is linking. So I will take USC -3 against Utah, and I'll leave the piece de resistance for you.
Yes, I'm gonna take Akron. I believe it's. I got 12.5. It's down to 11.5. Not a lot of difference there. Doubt many teams are going to be covering a 11.5, but not covering a 12.5. So Akron plus 11.5 at Buffalo. Um, I hope we get good Akron this week, not bad Akron. But yeah, give me the model likes it too, so give me Akron. And yeah,
Okay. All right, my plays. We're kind of at that point where there's not a lot of model plays, but whatever there is, I will tweet out this weekend. I only had 2 plays last week. Went 0-1 against the spread, but I'm 25-20 on the season there. My only over hit, and I'm 5-3 on overs. It makes me 16-5 on totals for the year. Probably Friday afternoon, I'll tweet out my model plays. And speaking of model plays, by far the best plays for us this year have been the dual model plays, where both of our models like a team by a touchdown or more. 39-27 on the season. That includes being forced to take what we knew was doomed Mission Colorado +30 last week. But hey, you take the good with the bad, I guess, right?
yeah. I mean, it's good to just have like a universal, like we both say this, so therefore it is a play no matter what. Because then, but it sucks because you can see that ship heading to the iceberg with Colorado, and you're like, oh no, stop. But like you can't do anything. But like also like at times it's like it makes you make plays. And it's like, oh, that actually went pretty well. So, but yeah, no, that Colorado, like we were both like, yeah, we're not doing that. No.
Neither of us had an inkling to like bet that one, even though it was a dual model play. 3 this week. So we've talked about 2 of these games in pretty much detail. Boise State, my model has Boise State 11 points better. You have them 12 points better, and that line is only 3. Pretty clear play there. Akron, we've been on for a couple weeks now, or just eyeing closely. You've got Akron almost 11 points better. I've got them basically a coin flip against Buffalo, but they're given an 11.5 to 12.5, so easily a play for both of us. Yeah, you mentioned you've got LSU and Georgia basically even. I've got LSU about 11 points, a little less than that. Worse than Georgia, so the 18 is a play for both of our models there.
Yeah. One more last thing before we go here, because I think we will not be back next week. Probably not. Well, we'll be back soon, but not maybe not for next week. Do you have a play for Army Navy?
I do not. That's one of those games where I guess I would just kind of throw out a little factoid. That game typically always goes under because these teams practice against the option all season long. So whatever element of surprise they have against other opponents is completely undone and reversed in this game.
That's fair. So the under right now is 33.5, which is historically low, but my model actually does have 30 as the total. So
That just sounds like, a game including Iowa against some Big Ten West team.
yeah, like Iowa, Illinois.
Yeah.
That was that game. That was that game. Um, yeah, I actually do have Army as like a 10-point favorite, so I'll take Army there if that's the play, because I don't think we'll be back next week, but we'll be back obviously with one, because we won't be back next week because then we'll be back with the full bowl preview, all the bowls, all the conference championship, all the semifinal games, all that stuff. So we will be back then. I It's going to be a great weekend here. There's a lot of ways this can end. A lot of controversy. If you're listening to this, we could already have an announcement as to whether or not the college football playoff is expanding to 12 teams in
Mm.
2024. I hope they are. If not, I'm sure you're going to hear about us talking about that in the next podcast. Uh, Enjoy a nice weekend of college football. Also, tune into Call of Duty podcast. That'll be released on Wednesday to Thursday, and that'll also happen this weekend. So we got college football conference championships, and we've got Call of Duty the first week. So enjoy that, everybody, and we will see you soon in time for the Bulls.